It was like a distant echo, a sound so ancient it felt as if it didn't belong to this life. It didn't come through the ears, but from an invisible point in the chest. It called. It had always called. And yet, how many times had she, the soul, pretended not to hear? Day after day, routine built high walls. Responsibilities stacked up like bricks, smothering any whisper from the unseen. But deep down, something remained. It was that feeling of having lived it all before. The conversations, the falls, even the joys, carrying that strange taste of repetition. There were mornings when her gaze would drift out the window, and her body swore it was in a different place. Déjà vu. A cup of coffee resting on the same table. A face crossing the street as if carrying a story that had once been hers. The world seemed to turn on an invisible gear, and each step, no matter how free it seemed, led back to the same starting point. In dreams, the call gained a voice. Fragmented words, as if spoken in a forgotten tongue. Sometimes, images of stone paths under mist. Sometimes, only the sound of footsteps approaching from behind, even when no one was there. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. A restless certainty that time was not linear and that she was trapped in a circular design, replaying plots she couldn't remember choosing. And here was the secret, not all cycles were chosen. Some were inherited, others were silent debts the soul carried long before its first breath of life. And while she tried to ignore this call, the wheel kept turning with an almost cruel precision. Until, on a seemingly ordinary day, the sound changed. It was no longer distant, no longer an echo. It was a whisper against her ear. Direct, almost imperative. And in that instant, the soul realized. The call was no longer asking. It was demanding. Before any name, before any face, there was a moment, or perhaps a millennium, when the soul made a pact. It wasn't a contract written on paper. It was etched into something far more enduring, its very energy. Invisible lines, like scars of light, were imprinted on its spiritual field, carrying promises, guilt, and decisions that would cross entire worlds. In that first life, or perhaps in the first memory of itself, the soul was not human. It was a pulsing fragment, aware of its own brilliance, yet vulnerable to the subtle web that bound all beings together. There, in the vastness of a starless sky and within a silence that had weight, it made a commitment. Maybe it vowed to protect someone. Maybe it swore never to abandon a love, even if it cost its own freedom. Maybe it promised to pay for a mistake that, in truth, had never been its own. Promises made with such intense emotion have the power to cross lifetimes. And so, life after life, the soul descended into bodies once again. The setting changed. The language changed. Even the face changed. But the storyline was always the same. Like seeds that, when scattered across different soils, always grow into the same tree, these invisible marks guided meetings, partings, losses, and reunions. That's why certain people, upon entering your life, awaken such a powerful sense of déjà vu. It isn't just recognition, it's the reunion of old roles in the same theater, only now with new costumes. In moments of deep silence, these marks seem to speak. A sudden warmth in the chest. An image that surfaced without reason, hands letting go on an ancient bridge, tears falling in a wheat field, a gate forever closed. Most souls forget. Forgetting is part of the process of reincarnation. But forgetting does not mean erasing. The code remains. And until it is redefined, it acts like a silent magnet, drawing in the same kind of pain, the same kind of test, the same unlearned lesson. And here is where the mystery begins to thicken. For there is an invisible structure keeping all of this in motion, like a flawless mechanism. A mechanism that seems impossible to escape. Imagine an invisible machine, not made of iron or gears, but of vibrations, memories, and impulses you don't even know you carry. It isn't out there, it's within you and all around you, like a silent field shaping every step, every encounter, every choice you believe you're making. This machine is the architecture of the cycle. A structure so ancient that it began to be built long before you were aware of the self. Every unresolved emotion, every unbroken promise, every fear never faced, was like a piece fitted into this mechanism. The curious thing is, it doesn't operate in a linear way. It's not just the past affecting the present. The cycle is like a sphere where all versions of you coexist. Yesterday, now, and tomorrow are happening at the same time, sending signals, feeding patterns back into each other. You feel its effect when you think you're taking a new path, only to suddenly find yourself in the same place again. And how does this structure sustain itself? The answer is simple and unsettling: through the vibration you emit. No matter how much you try to change on the outside, if inside you're vibrating at the same frequency as before, the cycle remains intact. It's like changing the scenery but keeping the same music. The dance will always be the same. Some call this the law of attraction. But beyond modern terms, it's an ancient principle guarded in the mystery schools. The initiates knew that when the soul is wounded or bound, it creates an energetic pattern that works like a magnet, drawing in experiences that force it to revisit the same pain until something breaks. And there's one detail most souls never notice. A secret the ancient masters never wrote on scrolls, but passed in whispers, from master to disciple. A detail that, once understood, begins to loosen the invisible bolts of this mechanism. But before revealing that detail, you must first meet the one who guards it. He has no face, or rather, he has every face that has ever crossed your path to keep you at the same point on the wheel. Some imagine him as a shadowy entity, cloaked in dense darkness, with eyes that gleam in the night. Others perceive him as an almost maternal presence, gentle yet firm, like hands that hold you back, refusing to let you cross the threshold before it's time. The guardian of repetition is not an enemy, but neither is he a friend. He is a contract. His role is simple and relentless: to ensure the lesson is learned before you move forward. If the lesson is to love without fear, he will place you face to face with abandonment until there's nothing left to fear. If it's to free yourself from control, he will weave you into suffocating relationships until you notice the key that's always been in your hands. Sometimes he appears as a recurring person in your life, someone you just can't avoid. Sometimes he's a pattern of events, opportunities that come and go in the same way, loves that always end the same, victories that slip away at the very last moment. The most unsettling part? The guardian knows your weaknesses by heart. He knows the wounds you try to hide even from yourself. And that's why his touch is so precise. He doesn't strike at random. He presses exactly where it hurts. In dreams, some see him at the edge of a road, sitting, watching in silence. His eyes do not judge, but they measure. He doesn't move to block your way, yet he doesn't stand to open it either. It's you who must prove you understand the game. The ancients said that when the soul is close to breaking the cycle, the guardian becomes more active, more present, as if sensing the imminence of the break. He knows that if you get past him, nothing will ever be the same. But before facing him, you must realize another uncomfortable truth. Perhaps what you've been calling free choices were never truly that free at all. The soul has always believed that choosing was the same as being free. Choosing the path to the left or to the right, to stay or to leave, to accept or to refuse. But what if all those choices were being made inside a script already written? The illusion of free will is like a stage lit by spotlights. You only see the scene before you, while the backstage, the place where the plot is decided, remains in darkness. You act, you improvise, you feel, but the story always leads you to the same ending. It's as if life were a play in which you've memorized the lines without even realizing it. Words that leave your mouth not because you chose them in that moment, but because they belong to the role you've been playing for centuries. How many times have you thought you were changing everything, only to discover later that you were in the same place? The city may be different, the people may have other names, but the final emotion, that bitter sense of repetition, remains the same. This is the invisible architecture at work. It creates hallways that seem like different paths, but that always meet at the same point. With each life, you walk through one of these hallways believing it's new, until you realize you're standing before the same locked door. And in that instant, in that shock, something rare can happen. The first crack in the cycle. It's the moment when the actor looks up, sees the stage lights, and asks, "Who wrote this story?" That question is dangerous for the cycle, because from that point on, the script can begin to unravel. But there is a price. Looking outside the plot means facing the mirror, and the mirror never forgives. The mirror is not made of glass. It does not hang on walls. It moves. It breathes. It wears skin and looks you in the eyes. The mirror is every person who crosses your path and stirs up emotions in you that feel out of proportion. It's that stranger who, with a single sentence, ignites an ancient rage. It's the friend who, without meaning to, touches a wound you thought had long healed. It's the love who, for no apparent reason, brings all your fears to the surface. Life, with surgical precision, places these human reflections before you so you can see, and perhaps heal, what you never wanted to face. And this mirror does not lie. It shows what you try to hide even from yourself. The insecurity you disguise with pride. The fear you mask with control. The pain you cover with smiles. The most uncomfortable truth is realizing that what you judge most harshly in others is often what you deny most in yourself. The arrogance you condemn. The coldness you criticize. The dependency you despise. All of it is, in truth, a part of you that the mirror insists on returning. There are days when this reflection stings like an open wound. Others when it confuses you, leaving the soul torn between rejecting and embracing what it sees. But ignoring the mirror is useless. It will appear again, in new forms and with new faces, until it is seen. And here is the secret few understand. It's not about liking the reflection. It's about recognizing it, admitting that it is a part of you, and only then being able to let it go. Because when the reflection is accepted, the frequency changes. And when the frequency changes, the cycle begins to tremble. And it's at that point that a different sound begins to echo. A new note. A chord that didn't exist before. The first melody capable of breaking chains. Everything in the universe vibrates. Every thought, every emotion, every gesture is a wave. And waves recognize similar waves. That's why old cycles keep coming back. Because the soul vibrates to the same song it already knows. But there is a moment, rare, almost sacred, when that song can change. It's not when you try to force the world to be different. It's when you change the melody within yourself. The chain-breaking frequency is neither high nor low, strong nor weak. It is new. And because it is new, it no longer finds the same points of attraction that kept the cycle active. It's like changing the dial on a radio. The old stations simply stop reaching you. Sometimes this change begins subtly. A small but genuine decision. Not answering an old impulse. Not following the automatic path. Choosing the pause instead of the reaction. Or even feeling gratitude in the midst of chaos. Each micro-choice becomes a different note added to your inner symphony. And as this new music grows, the field around the soul begins to reorganize. People start to drift away. Different opportunities arise. Doors that always seemed locked crack open. The ancient mystics said that, at this stage, the cycle still tries to pull you back. Old temptations return. Repeated situations show up as final tests. But if the frequency remains steady, the mechanism begins to lose strength. It's here that the guardian notices the change. And like every subtle contract, he cannot act without your energetic consent. By changing your frequency, you stop signing the agreement that kept the cycle in place. But there is one last step, and it is the most delicate of all. Because it's not enough to simply vibrate differently. You must deprogram the code that keeps the cycle alive. Deprogramming doesn't happen only in the mind. It must pass through the body, the emotions, and the invisible memory the soul carries. It's not about erasing, it's about rewriting. The ancient masters knew that energy responds to symbols. That's why their rituals were never mere gestures. Every movement, every word, every silence was a key. And to break a cycle, that key must open the door where it first began. The ritual may be simple in form, but profound in intention. It begins with a safe space. Silence. Slow breathing, as if each inhale were calling back fragments of yourself that remain trapped in ancient moments. Then comes the symbolic act. It could be writing down every repetition you recognize in your life, names, places, patterns, and burning them, watching the smoke carry the weight away. It could be walking through a place that symbolizes the cycle and deliberately leaving by a new route, even if it seems meaningless. Or speaking aloud, in a firm voice, a phrase that ends the contract. I end here what no longer belongs to me. Meanwhile, the imagination, the language of the soul, builds images of liberation. Chains dissolving, knots coming undone, ancient doors opening to fields where you have never been before. This is not magic in the common sense. It is magic in its original sense, conscious action upon your own energy. And in doing so, the field changes. The guardian watches. He doesn't stop you. He only waits to see if the choice will hold when life tests you again. But true freedom only comes when you face the final guardian. The one who is not outside, nor in other people, but in the deepest point of your own story. He has no fixed form. Sometimes he appears as a memory. Sometimes as a face you haven't seen in lifetimes. Other times as a voice inside your mind, so familiar it's impossible to tell if it's yours or not. The final guardian does not live in the outer world. He dwells in the core of your story, the exact point where the cycle was born. To reach him, you must pass through every layer. The masks you built, the memories you hid, the excuses you used to avoid feeling. When he appears, the air changes. Time loses its urgency. The body trembles, not from fear, but from recognition. Because deep down you know, this meeting was arranged before any life even began. The final guardian does not shout. He does not threaten. He simply holds in his hands the first scene, the exact moment you decided, whether consciously or not, that you would live this repetition. And he shows you how it all began. The promise made at the height of pain, the pact sealed in the absence of hope, the choice that seemed to save you but kept you bound. Looking at this hurts, because there's no longer a way to blame others, no longer a way to run. All that remains is the truth, bare, clear, inevitable. And it's in that moment that the key appears. Accept that the decision made sense at the time and that it no longer does. Forgive yourself for believing there was no other way. And then, in a silent act of courage, return that scene to the past. When that happens, something breaks. A sharp sound, like a chain snapping. A light wind, as if the soul suddenly had room to expand. The guardian smiles, not in triumph, but in relief. And without saying a word, he disappears. The mechanism stops turning. The ground opens to a new territory. First comes the emptiness. Not the cold emptiness of loss, but a dense, living silence, like the air before dawn. The absence of noise reveals a new space, so vast it's almost frightening. The soul walks through this territory like someone stepping outside prison walls for the first time. There are no walls, no doors, no invisible pressure pushing it down the same familiar path. The body notices it too. The shoulders feel lighter. Breathing deepens effortlessly. Even the gaze becomes clearer, as if seeing details that once slipped by unnoticed. The world outside hasn't changed much. The streets are the same. People still come and go. But the way the soul perceives them, that has changed forever. It's as if time had stopped being a circle and become an open horizon. Every step is now a true choice. Not a programmed choice, but a living, free decision. And in this space, something new emerges. The understanding that breaking the cycle is not the end. It's the beginning of a completely different story. A story still being written. And this time, it will be written with awareness. In the background, the silence remains. But it is not a lonely silence. It's the silence of a soul that knows it can listen again, and that, when the next call comes, it won't pretend not to hear. You are not the story you inherited, nor the contract you signed before you remembered your name. You are the silence that observes, the light that chooses, the traveler who can, at any moment, change the path. The cycle exists only until the moment you decide not to dance to the same song anymore.